On December 11, 1962, a bitter winter night descended over Toronto as two men, strangers to each other, walked through the gates of the Don jail, and neither left alive. In a city accustomed to order, shock swept through the streets, and in a nation already debating the meaning of justice, history was made, for this was the night Canada executed its last men. One of the men was a convicted cop killer, caught in a web of violence and crime, while the other faced a courtroom filled with doubt, a man whose guilt hung in question even before the gavel fell. The events that led them there were shrouded in complexity and tension, and in their final hours they left behind truths and secrets that echoed far beyond the prison walls. The cold corridors of the Don jail echoed with the footsteps of guards, the clang of heavy doors, and the quiet whispers of fate as the nation watched. Newspapers screamed their stories, and society paused to confront the weight of life and death. This was not merely punishment, it was a turning point that reshaped Canadian justice, sparked controversy, and forever changed the way the country viewed the cost of human life. To understand the full scope of this story, we need to go back to where it all began, but first, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell icon so you will not miss our next jaw-dropping True Crime Canada story. Ronald Arthur Turpin was born in Ottawa in 1933, the son of a working-class family navigating the lingering hardships of a post-Depression Canada, a young man whose early years seemed ordinary but were marked by restlessness, brushes with petty crime, and a growing sense of disconnection from the society around him, a man whose path, unknown to him or anyone else at the time, led to one of the most infamous nights in Canadian history. By February 12, 1962, Turpin's life had escalated into violent crime when he attempted the Red Rooster restaurant robbery in Scarborough, stealing $632, but in the chaos that followed, he shot and killed Constable Frederick "Jack" Nash, a respected officer whose life ended instantly, sparking shock, outrage, and national attention as citizens struggled to reconcile such violence with a society accustomed to order and civility. His arrest came swiftly, and Turpin's trial, which concluded in October 1962, became a spectacle of legal theater. Prosecutors meticulously presented evidence tracing his movements, the gun, and the stolen money, while his defense painted a portrait of a troubled young man, attempting to highlight mitigating circumstances, yet the unflinching facts and the weight of public outrage sealed his conviction for capital murder, sentencing him to death under Canadian law at the time. Once in prison, Turpin's daily life became a monotonous rhythm of confinement in the Don jail, a fortress of stone and steel steeped in history and echoing with the footsteps of guards and the clang of keys, where every day consisted of strict routines, including meals, head counts, and exercise in the small yard, and where he spent hours writing letters, reading, and reflecting on the choices that brought him there, showing glimpses of regret, defiance, and introspection as he prepared for the inevitability of his fate. In the days leading to his execution on December 11, 1962, meticulous preparations unfolded. The gallows were inspected, procedures rehearsed, and Turpin's movements choreographed to ensure the execution proceeded according to law. For his last meal, he reportedly received a plate of steak, potatoes, vegetables, and pie, a modest final reminder of the ordinary humanity that persisted even in the shadow of death. On the day of his execution, the atmosphere inside the Don jail was thick with tension. The clatter of keys, the measured footsteps of guards, the hushed whispers of chaplains, and the shadows cast by the high stone walls combined to create an almost cinematic stage for the final act. Turpin was led from his cell, calm but solemn, through the prison corridors where every echo seemed amplified by the enormity of the moment, until he arrived at the gallows, his gaze forward, a mixture of acceptance and quiet resolve in his eyes. His last words, spoken in a low, almost resigned tone, were some consolation, a brief acknowledgement of his fate that carried both acceptance and the faintest trace of defiance. At precisely 7 a.m., the trapdoor opened, and Ronald Turpin's life ended, making him one of the last men ever executed in Canada. Following the execution, his body was buried in an unmarked grave at Toronto's Prospect Cemetery. Arthur Lucas was born on December 18, 1907, in Cordele, Georgia, and long before his final hours at the Don jail, he carried with him a lifetime steeped in crime, a career criminal known for armed robbery, fraud, and other offenses, whose restless past would collide fatally with Canada's justice system. By November 17, 1961, Lucas's criminal trajectory escalated when he became involved in the murder of the Landcrater, a 44-year-old man who had served as a police informant, and though questions lingered about the full scope of his involvement in related crimes, the court held him responsible, setting the stage for a conviction that would place him on death row. When Lucas faced trial, the prosecution presented a methodical account of his actions, detailing how he traveled to Toronto armed and prepared, intent on eliminating a man who threatened the criminal networks he had long navigated, while the defense argued that much of the case rested on questionable testimony and circumstantial evidence, highlighting inconsistencies and raising doubts about whether the law had truly captured the whole truth. Despite these arguments, the weight of the crime and the evidence presented led to his conviction for capital murder and a sentence that carried the ultimate penalty under Canadian law at the time. Life on death row at the Don jail was a grim routine that pressed heavily upon Lucas, whose days narrowed to measured walks to head count, confinement in a cold, stone cell, brief interactions with guards and chaplains, and long hours spent reflecting on a life defined by choices that had led inexorably to the shadow of execution. He spoke with the prison chaplain, confiding his continued insistence on innocence for the murder while acknowledging the consequences of his past misdeeds, and spent his remaining time writing letters and preparing mentally for the inevitability of his fate. In the early hours of December 11, 1962, Lucas was led into the execution chamber. Handcuffed and positioned on the gallows, his legs bound and a hood placed over his head, the final moments of his life approached with cold inevitability. When the lever was pulled, the drop was miscalculated, and the force nearly severed his head, a harrowing testament to the lethal precision demanded by the mechanics of hanging. Even in those last moments, Lucas reportedly whispered to the chaplain that he maintained his innocence for the murders but acknowledged having committed other crimes, suggesting that perhaps this fate was unavoidable. His last meal went unrecorded, leaving only the stark reality of his death. Officially pronounced in the early hours of December 11, 1962, Lucas was buried in an unmarked grave at Prospect Cemetery in Toronto, a silent witness to a dark chapter in Canadian history. The morning after the executions, Canada awoke to shock and debate that rippled through every corner of the nation, as newspapers carried stark headlines detailing the deaths of Ronald Turpin and Arthur Lucas, their photographs and the stories of their crimes filling pages, while letters poured into editors' offices, citizens voicing both horror at the killings and sympathy for the condemned, sparking passionate arguments in homes, workplaces, and Parliament alike about the morality, justice, and necessity of capital punishment. Even as the nation processed the events, controversy simmered around Arthur Lucas in particular, with lingering doubts about his guilt for the murder that had sent him to the gallows. The evidence was not unequivocal, and questions about the reliability of witness testimony, his reckless yet non-lethal actions, and the miscalculations during his execution fueled heated debates among legal experts, ethicists, and ordinary citizens, forcing the public to confront the uncomfortable possibility that an innocent man may have been executed. These executions, and the debates they ignited, played a pivotal role in the national reckoning with the death penalty, laying the groundwork for its eventual abolition in 1976, as lawmakers, courts, and society reconsidered whether the state should hold the ultimate power to take a life, and whether justice could truly be served when human error was inevitable. The last prisoners sentenced to death saw their sentences commuted to life imprisonment, marking a transition from public retribution to a system focused on incarceration, rehabilitation, and legal safeguards. Experts looking back describe this period as a turning point in Canadian justice. Legal scholars note that the executions exposed the ethical and procedural weaknesses of capital punishment, while ethicists argue that public opinion had shifted irreversibly, recognizing the value of human life even for the gravest offenders. The deaths of Turpin and Lucas, controversial and haunting, forced the nation to confront the moral, legal, and societal consequences of taking a life in the name of justice, shaping Canadian law and society for decades to come. 2 men, 1 night. An entire system changed forever. On December 11, 1962, Ronald Turpin and Arthur Lucas became the last people executed in Canada, their deaths marking the end of an era and igniting questions that still echo today. Would you have supported the death penalty in Canada back then? Do you believe Arthur Lucas was truly guilty, or was justice flawed in its final act? If you want more jaw-dropping true crime stories from Canada's past, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another gripping tale that exposes the secrets, controversies, and shocking moments that shaped our history. We want to hear from you. Comment below what you think about the removal of the death penalty in Canada, and whether you would like to see it brought back.